Hi everyone, so a quick video from me. A few things I wanted to discuss in this video. Firstly, I wanted to explain, I realised that when I listened to some of my other videos on my channel that I've got up, I actually sound a bit strange. It's not because I am talking funny, it's because I had been very tired at the time and I used a software program to edit the audio to make it sort of sound a bit more normal, but in the end it probably sounded a bit more strange. So just to say that this is not a fake channel, and the strange sounding audio is not because I'm a perp or anything, it's because I had been cutting and pasting the audio with this Audacity software, which is free. And it's really good also for raising the volume on some of the audios when people have interviews. I know that, for example, Romola D has some interviews and sometimes her audio is quite loud and the guests are quite low. So Audacity is really good for doing that kind of thing as well. So we have just had Phil's funeral, Phil Leek, and he wanted a Viking funeral, so his mother went on a boat, and we've just had that on the 27th. I was very upset indeed because a few days before the funeral, they made my problems with my landlady come to a head, and they got her to kick me out just the days before the funeral. So I nearly missed the 27th, and I only remembered in the afternoon evening, but I still remembered on the day. But that was the kind of sadistic torture that, I was experiencing as an offshoot of what happened to Phil, wanting to be there in spirit on the day of the funeral and them making me basically have to do something else for those couple of days. So I wasn't able to make a Phil video, a tribute video, but thanks very much to TI Television, because that tribute video was fabulous, and it was lovely to see how many people were sending their wishes through on Facebook as well. To be honest, things still don't feel the same. I think things will always feel very different for me now about this targeting program. I had never seen anything like that before. I had only heard stories, and when you hear stories, it's difficult to know what is and what's not true. But I know that Phil was true, and so I think we are all still thinking of Phil and thinking of his family, because I can't imagine a greater suffering in the world than what his family have had to go through now. Apart from, I suppose, the suffering that Phil had to go through during his lifetime and so many other TIs have had to go through. So we won't forget Phil. I don't think we should forget Phil. I think we should keep Phil's memory alive and his story alive through us. I think we can work together to make sure that Phil's passing was not in vain. On the contrary, may only justice and blessings come out of it, although nothing can ever put that wrong right. One more thing I wanted to say about Phil as well is that in a previous video, I had assumed that maybe he had been slightly weaker than the rest of the TIs because he hadn't been making videos, and I wanted to clear the record actually, because I think that would be a very grave underestimation of Phil's strength and what he endured. So as I was going through his videos, I realised that he had been heavily targeted since when he was a child, and he was such a brave and strong person, and that's why I think they got to him, because they were riddled with jealousy about who he was. So I just want to clear that up as well. So the first topic that I wanted to talk about today, which has been in my mind, is the fact that at the moment all us TIs are fighting against the mental health system, where we are made to look crazy and stupid without realising, because we are seeing a different picture of things than other people who are not TIs. And what's happening is these non-TIs are getting grounds to suggest that it's some kind of mental illness on our part. And what I wanted to say in this video is to start a revolution in terms of, in fact, the mental health services are desperately, desperately needed by us TIs, because the perps and the main handlers rolling out this program are so massively, massively ill and sick. Mental health shouldn't be our enemy, it should be our best friend. And what we need to do is start turning it around. I was speaking with another TI today, a very experienced TI, and she said, look, whenever you start to talk to anybody who's not a TI about this, the perps that are attached to the TI automatically start mind controlling the non-TI, and the non-TI comes up with all types of disbelief and false justifications as to why this could be the case. What I said to her at the time is that I think that they are targeting some kind of doubt centre in the brain, a sort of paranoia centre. They've worked out where to touch the brain to make the person feel doubt, and then they just trigger it somehow. You know, and this is why we're getting, oh, but I don't think you're being targeted. Oh, I don't think that criminals exist. Oh, I don't think that there are deranged sadists who hurt other people in the world. And what I think we need to start doing now is turning round the mental health services. People who burn down Grenfell Tower, people who plot to smash the Twin Towers when people are still inside, people who mutilate other people's bodies for pleasure, people who traffic children. These people are very, very, very sick indeed. And I have been conducting my own sort of unprofessional profiling of their psychosis for some time, but I'm sure many other TIs have been doing as well. But actually, I think we need the professional help. It's not just professional help. I think we need a communal form of help for these people. There are quite a few of these people who have become severely, severely sadistic. Sadistic on a level that normal people can never imagine. I mean, I'm pulling one example out of the hat, but there are so many and we know. But for example, Grenfell Tower. Who on earth would burn down people while they're sleeping? I wouldn't even do that to an ant. If a spider comes in my house, I'll catch it in a glass and put it in the garden. I would never even stamp on a spider. This whole programme, the deeds that we have all witnessed before our very eyes, there is no doubt in my mind, in our minds, that the people who are doing this are as sick as hell. Okay? And what we need to do is we need to get the entirety of the mental health system focused on the real illness. And I think it's a bit of an emergency, because every single day that those people do not get treatment, okay, other people are at risk of being brutally murdered and hurt. So that is one thing that I wanted to get out there, so people can start thinking about how we can start turning around the mental health services. I have done some work into the mental health side of it before, and I have got a website up, an old website. I can put a link to that in the description below. But what I had said in that website was basically that what we have to do is distinguish between paranoid delusions and real facts. Saying that you're being persecuted doesn't mean that you are delusional. Persecution is the entire basis of the international asylum process. Imagining that criminals and serious crime does not exist is naive and quite deranged. On the contrary, we know how many criminals, sick, sadistic criminals exist. We have documentaries, we have programs, series, profiling criminals and the criminal mind, the deviant mind. The police are dedicated to catching and understanding the deviant mind. I always, there are some people that always stick in my mind. For example, Ted Bundy. I'm not sure if you heard of Ted Bundy, but he was somebody who got off on brutal slaughter of women. It's quite Ted Bundy-ish, where, their pleasure, their enjoyment has to be somebody else's suffering. And to suggest that these Ted Bundys can be going around without being secured is dangerous. These people are dangerous to humanity. They're dangerous to children, adults, to animals. They are dangerous to the entire world. they are conducting wars where millions and millions of people are being hurt and displaced. In fact, history shows that there has been a campaign of mislabeling victims as delusional as part of a very clear strategy to avoid detection. So I'm going to put the link to my discussion about false claims and paranoia and convincing people about whether this is really happening or not. But the important thing is to make sure that these psychologists remember that they are the ones who are supposed to know about neuroscience. They are the ones who are supposed to understand about electrical activity in the brain. They are the ones who are supposed to know about monitoring and affecting brainwaves and how brainwaves can be affected with various frequencies. As I said, MK Ultra was a psychology experiment. So how can these professional psychologists never have heard of MK Ultra? How can these professional psychologists never have come across the sociopathy of criminals? We need to get them to recognise the gravity of the problem that we're dealing with, and they have to deal with this problem. The last thing that I wanted to mention for today is in terms of my occult experiences, and I have been putting a few things together, and I wanted to just tell you, because I know when I start talking about this that even some really well experienced TIs think, oh, she's, maybe talking a bit, doesn't seem to make sense, And it's funny because when you read another TI's story, there were always some things that you think, oh, really, did that happen? And unfortunately, even though as TIs we are all very aware that this happens and that when we say things we are not believed, because I'm talking about occult things, I think people will think, well, wait a second, that's a little bit Bible-y for me, that's a little bit Jesus-y for me, And also I'm doing a religious project as well, so, people might think, well, maybe that's just, some kind of mind control technology. But I'll tell you something, if you ever saw the film Carrie, I think the original was made in 1976, but they remade it in 2013. It's a book by Stephen King about this girl who was bullied and didn't have a very strong relationship with her mother. And her mother was sort of, driving her a bit mad, basically, always nagging at her and didn't believe her and saying that she was ill when she wasn't. And then because she was so vulnerable, she was bullied by her peers at school and they were really horrible to her. But then she ended up turning around and having some kind of almost supernatural ability to execute judgment on all of them. And many years ago, I remember, before I knew anything about targeting, somebody had come up to me. I had met somebody through a religious network, and he might well have been a perp, he might not have been. But he said, oh, do you know, because, I was brought up in the Orthodox Jewish tradition and everything. And he said, oh, do you know, there's a way to get angels to do things for you, And I said, really? Because I was really into that. I was like, oh my God, really? I said, how? And he goes, oh, well, I don't really want to say too much, but there's ways to get them to do that. I said, really? Because, I was really into it at the time, And I'm not sure if you know much about Judaism, but they have a thing called the Talmud, and that's where all the ancient rabbis, they were all into spiritual stuff and things like that. So I was like, oh, really? And there was also a film called The Extraordinary Story of Emily Rose, and apparently that was a true story as well, or that was based on a true story as well. No, it was The Exorcism of Emily Rose. Basically, apparently, this girl, in the film The Exorcism of Emily Rose, this girl dies of self-inflicted wounds and malnutrition following an attempted exorcism. But apparently it was based on a true story. And what I'm saying is, I have been noticing some kind of supernatural activity. For those who don't believe in God, this will sound as though I am, bonkers. But what I'm trying to say is that as TIs, believing the story of other TIs can be difficult. But I am a genuine TI. I mean, if you look at my projects, you'll see that I'm doing a project about Israel, for better or for worse. And I'm not a liar. I was brought up a religious person, and that's not a guarantee of not being a liar, being religious. That's not a guarantee. But I hope if you get to know me and look at my profile, look at my websites, look at my videos, look at who I am, you'll see that I'm not a liar. And I'm not out of my mind either. I have been noticing some supernatural things. As I say, when I was opening the Bible, things coming up and things being said in the Bible that were relevant. Things were mentioned about Phil. More things were mentioned about Phil, actually. I was mentioning the Philistines. The concept of Phil and the Philistines and Philip in Samaria and the concept of Samaria, because those are the words that came up just after his death. Those concepts wove their way in to the rest of my narrative for a while after, and they are still weaving their way in. To be honest, I didn't really want to say a lot of the things that happened about Phil because I felt that if people didn't believe what I was saying, people would think that I am taking advantage of such a sad occasion. So I haven't actually gone into detail about what's happened with Phil, but just because I wanted to sort of, be careful about people's feelings. But if people want to know, then I'm happy to say, and I perhaps should say at some point as well. So I don't have much more to report. Well, I've got a lot of stories that I can say, but I won't go into them now. But I just wanted to basically clarify all those things. So people are maybe wondering about the weird audio and also the weird occult stuff as well. But yeah, I will say now, by the way, that I don't think it is based on the Carrie situation. I think that's a red herring. What I'm suggesting to you TIs is that you probably have more power to fight against these people than you realise. If anybody's interested, you can ask me any questions and I'll happily answer them. But otherwise, I won't go into it more for now. But yeah, it was lovely to see many people posting candles on Phil's timeline recently. And I just feel as though there should be more people. There should be more people around, and I think what happened is because as a TI he was isolated. Perhaps, he lost some of his, connections, and I have as well. But what he does have is a very strong TI community. People who believe him, people who know what he went through, people who feel what he went through. And perhaps that's more than a lot of people have in other circumstances. So more from me later, and let's keep Phil's memory alive forever. God bless everyone.